Welcome to Beyond the Scar, C-section stories and strategies for healing. This podcast is dedicated to helping cesarean moms not just recover, but truly thrive after their birth surgery. I'm your host, Nicole Alfred, registered massage therapist and C-section recovery coach. And I'm here to guide you through your journey of postpartum recovery with a blend of real life stories and expert advice. Each week, we dive into the experiences of incredible moms who have navigated their own recovery paths. And then we're also going to hear from experts who provide actionable strategies for a holistic approach to your postpartum. From physical healing and emotional support to practical tips for balancing self-care with motherhood, this podcast is here to equip you with the tools and the inspiration that you need to live a healthy, fulfilling life after birth. So, whether you are in the early stages of recovery or you're looking for ways to enhance your healing journey, you're in the right place. Let's get started and thrive together. Welcome to Beyond the Scar, where we support C-section moms to thrive beyond recovery. I'm Nicole Alfred, your host, and today I'll be speaking with Katie Breard, an online fitness and nutrition coach, and we're going to be talking all about post-C-section fitness and how Katie turned her personal journey with 2 C-sections into her passion, helping moms all over the world. Thank you so much for being here, Katie. I'd love for you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your journey and your experiences and how they shaped your current work.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me too, Nicole. It's so fun to finally see your face and chat in person too. So, as you said, my name is Katie Breard. I'm the owner, I own my own company, which is Method by Katie Breard. And I'm a fitness and nutrition coach for moms. And I like to say I work with women in every stage of motherhood, right? I'm an IVF mom myself. So it's women who are trying to get pregnant through having an active pregnancy to that first year postpartum where there's so much unknown where it comes into fitness and nutrition. And then just I work with a lot of really busy moms who might fitness or nutrition or just body recomposition goals from home and are just really lost about how to fit that all in this crazy period of having young kids and all. I'm of 3 myself. I have a 7, 5, and 1-year-old. And so, it's just crazy here. And we live outside Boston now.
Working as an online coach and, being a mom of 3, being able to reflect back to those pregnancy and postpartum experiences. So you said you've had 2 C-sections, but you have 3 kids. So does that mean the first was a vaginal, or how did that work for you?
Yeah, so all 3 of my kids have been IVF pregnancies, and then I've had very, very different pregnancy and delivery experiences with all of them. So my first was we went through IVF. It was like a pretty run-of-the-mill pregnancy. My water broke with Bailey, my daughter, but at 37 weeks. So I was induced, had a vaginal delivery, and then it was a pretty cut and dry postpartum experience, I'll say. Actually, to get into all 3, what's also interesting too is all 3 of my pregnancies and deliveries have really shaped my business and my experience of what I do for the day. Actually, previous to my son, Bo, my third, when I had Bailey, my first, I taught fitness on the side. It was always a passion of mine, and I was always an athlete myself. But I was more of pre-kids, in my extra time, I would teach group fitness classes, and then I actually did advertising in New York City and Boston for years. So that was kind of my whole separate career focus. So with Bailey, I was working in advertising. I had a pretty standard pregnancy and postpartum experience. And then 2 years later, or a year and a half later, I guess, went to get pregnant with my son and was having we did IVF and then was having a very kind of typical healthy pregnancy. It was very active. It was your ideal pregnancy. And then at 27 weeks, I came home from work that day, gave Bailey, who was 1.5 at the time, gave my toddler dinner, sat down on the couch, and my water actually broke 3 months. And I like to say when I tell people that, just because there's often a lot of pregnant listeners on here or women who might want to be pregnant again, It's very, very rare. It's called PPROM. I had never heard about it when it happens. It happens to about like 1 or 2% of women, and there's no real rhyme or reason why. But it was obviously terrifying. We rushed to the hospital. And when we got there, they were like, okay, you're going to live in the hospital for the next until the baby delivers, and you go into labor in the next 48 hours. So I was given like steroid shots for having a like very, very early preemie. All these things are like most of the time, statistically, you'll deliver in the next 48 hours, but we don't know. And we obviously want you to stay pregnant as long as possible. So for you can stay pregnant, you're going to live here in the hospital on bed. And then you like to do for fun. And I was like, I work full time. I have a toddler. I don't really have a lot of like, I love to work out, but obviously I'm not doing that here right now. So yeah, I ended up making it until 34 weeks. So almost two, when you actually have to deliver because the risk of infection becomes too much.
But wait, hold on. You lived at the hospital for 2 months.
Truly life-changing experience. And especially when you have no, like, the longest I had been away from Bailey the day before this happened was, I think I was freaking out about going on a girls' weekend for 2 days. So I like literally had to have people bring me my like computer and all of my stuff because I had like left my desk that day thinking I would be back in the morning. Like it was just like totally out of blue that this happened. And I also am just someone that like my way of dealing with stress is movement, right? So like being on bed rest that long.
Yes.
Was not expecting it. Yeah, it was very hard. And while I was there, I was told because my son was so early, he was still head up. And so I was told that I most likely would be having a C-section. And I really didn't want to have a C-section because I'd had stomach surgery in college. I know how hard like the recovery was from that. I'm an athlete. I just would have preferred not to have. I actually opted I tried to do a version, and I was like, if we make it to 34 weeks when I can deliver, I'd love to try to have a version. And there were actually, I think there were like 25 people in the room because it was a teaching hospital when it actually happened, because no one, they don't normally do versions on people whose water had broken, who had no version. It was unsuccessful, so I ended up having a C-section. And my son was born at 34 weeks, so he was in the NICU for a month.
Aww.
And that experience, he's fine now. I like to say, too, he just lost his first preemie baby, and this story happened. And it was obviously very hard, that experience of living in the hospital and then getting back in shape after having a C-section, like right after being on bed rest for 2 months, was so life-changing and really difficult to me. It felt a lot like a rock bottom experience. I just remember leaving the hospital and feeling like, in just total shock because I had been living like in this hospital for 2 months. I had gone in being in like quote unquote like pregnancy goals, like a super active pregnancy, all of these things. I'd been in shape my whole life, to total bed rest, having this like major abdominal surgery that I wasn't at all expecting or wanting, and leaving and barely being able to walk.
Right.
And just feeling so lost about what I was going to do to get back in shape. I felt like kind of like my like active lifestyle was going to be completely over, and I was just so bummed. And
what a mind game too, though, right?
Yeah.
Like being in the and I hear this a lot from clients, like, okay, I just have to make it to this, and then I could go exercise. Like, especially when they're pregnant, if they've been told they have to be on bed rest, or they're in a lot of pain because they're pregnant and there's nothing really that's going to relieve it. So now they've adjusted their exercise or movement schedule, and it's like, I just have to make it to this day, and then I have the baby and I'll be okay. And then boom, cesarean happens. And it's like, now I have another, X amount, even though you do have to rest after you have a vaginal delivery, that they're just like, and this feeling lost and hopeless almost, because you mentally have been like, okay, preparing for that time when you can actually start moving again and feel good. That's your stress relief. That's how you connect to yourself. And to so many women, I find in postpartum after cesarean, that disconnect is so strong, especially for like my athlete patients, where they're just like needing that movement and that connection to themselves physically.
Yeah, no,
How did you deal
100%.
with that? How did you kind of like going through that, be like, okay, pick myself back up. Like, let's try to start small. And like, how did you get through that part?
Yeah, so I like to say too, like that experience of being in the hospital and, having a preemie, having a C-section I really didn't want and having to like barely be able to walk, go back to like pick up the pieces of my life with like my daughter at home, go to the NICU every day, just be like so uncomfortable in my body. Like it definitely was a really, really tough time for me, but it also was a really positive time because when I was in the hospital, I had a lot of time to think about what I wanted and like what was really important. My goals were.
Because you're
I
alone.
had been, yeah, I mean, I had
When
nothing
are
else
you
to do.
ever alone like that?
Yeah, 100%. And I'd been really in this like fast paced career of advertising in New York and
Right.
Austin that I really wasn't very happy with at all. I loved it when I started, but then really like once I became a mom and had Bailey, like the stress of it just like the juice was not worth the squeeze anymore. But it was like one of these
I think
things
a lot of us go through that.
yeah, and I was one of those things
Motherhood changes us a bit.
it does. It does. And it was
Yep.
one of those things I had worked really, really hard at. And I don't think I would have had like kind of like the balls really to walk away from if this
Yeah.
experience hadn't happened to me. But I remember the first day I was in the hospital, someone came in and they were like, or one of my first thoughts when I woke up that morning in the hospital and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be here for like who knows how long was thank goodness I don't have to go to work tomorrow. And I was like, that is like not like what I want to be doing. So I had a lot of time to like really think about what I wanted and I really reevaluated like what made me happy and like what I wanted. Once you become a mom, you have so little free time. That's like any moment that you have has to really make it count, especially I think when it comes to a career. Like if I'm going to be away from my kids all day and like pouring like all this mental space, it has to be something I really care about and I'm passionate about. And so that I kind of like the hospital time like helped me like reframe what I wanted, right? And I was like, okay, I'm gonna just start working in fitness in general and have that be my like full-time career change. But then when I had this C-section and I went into the hospital being in like incredible shape and left the hospital the weakest I've ever been by far in my life. I was like, okay, what help can I get right now? And that postpartum experience versus the first one I had where I had just like a very cut and dry, like vaginal delivery. I think I was like running within like a month of my like
Yeah.
delivery
Yeah.
compared to
Yeah.
the second was just so night
Yeah.
and day. And I remember going to
Yeah.
that 6 week postpartum experience and that the first doctor's appointment when you're cleared for exercise was exactly the same. Like I was expecting it to be totally different because of this crazy experience I'd had and my C-section, all these things. And they were like, yep, you're fine. I was like, wait. I
Yeah.
just had
I know.
abdominal surgery, like all of these things. And there was just nothing there.
So glad you said
Yeah.
that because I tell people as well, by the way, your 6 week visit is the same prescription as someone who vaginally delivered, where it's go back to regular life and you barely even get looked at or touched. And they were like, really? And because I
It
hear a
makes no
lot
sense.
like, oh, I'm not 6 weeks yet. I'm not at 6 weeks yet. I'm like, 6 weeks means nothing. It's just tissue healing. It doesn't mean that you have a magic password to go through the door. It's literally, the same prescription as someone who did not have major surgery. And so what was kind of like a big thing you realized about recovery in that part for your body to get strong again that moms need to know about?
Yeah, so I kind of realized at that point, I was like, okay, no one out here is gonna help me. And I also just felt like there was like
It's true. No one's
not
coming to
very
save
much,
you.
yeah, no
Yeah.
one's coming
No,
to
it's
save
true.
me. And so I need to like take this into my own hands a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think like the fire fueled of just how insane this experience had been for me, like really gave me the passion to be like, I need to take care of myself. Like I have to pick myself back up from this experience. And so this is like the bottom and we are moving up to the top. Like
How
I
long
think it
did
was
it
just
take you? Because I want moms to
yeah.
hear, like, you're someone who is already very motivated, fitness and connection to herself. Like, how long did it take you? Two kids,
Yeah, I think like it took a while and I think and I can kind of speak to like my first C-section versus my second of like the first one I hadn't specialized in what I do now and all these things so I didn't really know exactly what I was doing and so it definitely took longer but I think I spent a lot of that first year really, really frustrated that I wasn't where I had quote unquote been before or where I wanted to be. And I think the thing
Comparing.
that, yes, and I think the thing that people don't realize about C-section recovery, because no one is going to be there to tell you this, is it's like you can be cleared for exercise and get back into it, but your all of that like scarring and muscle tissue and all these things, even as you are getting stronger, like the scar can be feeling almost like tighter and tighter and all of these things. And that is going to greatly impact the way you feel when you're exercising, because if you have no mobility in your core, or if you're like able to engage your core through breath work anymore, everything when it comes to physical activity is going to be a lot harder. So I think I initially just like jumped back in, was like, I'm going to be able to do what I did before. And it like very much didn't work. And then I think I spent a lot of that
When
first
that didn't
year.
work, what did that feel like? Was it like you were in pain? Your body wasn't changing? You weren't getting stronger? Like, what did that look like for you? Just so listeners can understand, like, if they're on that journey.
Yeah, no, I think, and I always explain this to clients I work with now. I think like if you go back into exercise after a C-section, a lot of the times you can feel like my arms are getting stronger, my legs are getting stronger, but then my core is just this like weird unicorn land where I can even be like doing the exercises, but I'm not even necessarily feeling them anymore. So I think I felt that way a lot. And then I also felt like no matter what I did, I couldn't engage my core. My core just like felt and looked weak and loose. Like it just like I was like, I'm getting back in shape, but like nothing is happening there. And around the 3 or 4 month mark is when I decided to leave advertising, go back to school full time. So I went back to school full time for personal fitness and nutrition, and then went on to specialize in pre and postnatal fitness and nutrition. And so in that first year, as I was recovering myself, I was also learning about like really diving deep into like the specific things for recovery that are so helpful. So I was learning as I was going, but it took a long time, right? Like it's not an instantaneous, like you learn, like I don't know, you get cleared and you're like go back into working out and you're going to feel good right away. I think like knowing the tricks, that can be really helpful in the first 6 weeks, even about like learning about diaphragmatic breathing and all of these things, can make the recovery a lot faster. But it's something you kind of constantly have to be working on that first year and a half, I'd say, to have the best result.
And I'm glad you gave that timeline, because I think a lot of people think, okay, I'll do it for like a month or a couple of weeks and it should be good. And it's like, no, your body is still changing. If you're breastfeeding, if you're still not sleeping well, like all these things are going to affect your body. And I think in our society, there's like this huge push to have to bounce back and look a certain way. And it's either from our peers or it's from ourselves, of having to have this certain type of body shape or size or whatever the measurements are. But really, and I tell clients this, like, it's building that foundation. Because sure, you could be looking like you bounce back physically. You could be getting stronger arms. You could be performing, different, more squats, heavier squats at the gym. But can you do your everyday tasks in the house without pain, without feeling exhausted? And so, core connection is a big one. And I think a lot of people still don't know a lot about pelvic health and core health. They think, doing just dead bugs or planks is enough. You talked about breathing. What do you think is the most important thing for C-section moms to know about recovering their core strength? Or even some myths that you've heard that you want to share about that?
Yeah, so I think there are a lot of things that I wish I knew the first time around with my C-section that just no one really gives to moms, that can make the recovery in those first 6 months a lot better. Because when I went on to have my, there was a couple years in between kids, and I started working with women who've had C-sections a lot. And so seeing like their experience, and then actually having a C-section with my third baby a couple years later, where like right off the bat, I knew very much what to do. I like worked with pelvic floor PT people. I like started with these like foundations at day one. And I can say that like the C-section recovery process was much more successful faster.
Yeah. Yep.
So I
The
think like
timeline, was it like half the
yeah,
time, less than half? Like,
much less than half. And I actually,
so when you know what to do, you will heal quicker.
100%.
Yeah.
I actually had, it's like another crazy story, but I had a very like normal, like it was a very high risk pregnancy after both of my third baby, very heavily monitored, but it was fine. And then I had actually like another crazy delivery where I had a bowel obstruction and got very sick during my delivery and had to have a vertical C-section last year.
Oh,
Is like significantly generally harder to recover.
that is harder, 100%.
But because, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be so much harder than even the second time.
Right.
But because I knew what to do right away, because I had coached a lot of women in postpartum recovery from a C-section, because I like had all these pelvic floor PT and people that I worked with, I jumped right into it and I was blown away by, I mean, within 6 months, I was in a far better place than a year and a half after my second. And my scar today, even though it's a much higher one, looks so much better, functions so much better, like 12, 14 months out than in 5 years postpartum with my second. So I do think like laying the groundwork in the first year postpartum, post C-section is very, very important. And now what I have like a C-section course that I have for moms, or just with the one-on-one women I coach online, I really try to explain those, because I think if you think about the first, and it is a much longer timeline than people want to hear, but if you think about the first year postpartum, those first 4 months after a C-section, you're like laying the internal groundwork because everything is cut apart, right? So you have to think about really like have that be a really rebuilding phase. And when I say that, I don't mean that you can't exercise at all or you can't do different things. I just mean like think about like the daily tools that are really helpful for the internal things you can't see. So I think about telling women right off the bat to really focus on protein and collagen. Because if you've ever talked to a nurse in a hospital, protein and collagen is what heals internal wounds, right? So if you have anyone who has major surgery, they always suggest that. But for some reason, it's oftentimes not told to new moms who have had a C-section.
Well, look what they give you in the hospital.
Right, exactly. Like,
Garbage.
look at the food in the hospital. So really focusing on like high quality supplements and high quality protein and collagen just in your diet is incredibly important. And I also think it's funny that that's like often overlooked, because I think when people are breastfeeding, people talk about, oh, it's like all these like carbohydrates for breastfeeding, but like protein and collagen is going to be what's internally healing your C-section wound. And it's also just better for like all over recovery. So I say that to all of my new moms, but it's especially important for C-section moms. And then icing your C-section wound is like not talked about at all, but that can be incredibly beneficial in those first, like especially 6 weeks, but like a couple months postpartum of just all the internal like inflammation and swelling. Wearing a binder for support, really learning how to do diaphragmatic breathing, massaging your C-section scar, cupping your C-section scar. There's like all these things that people don't talk about that are like things that women can have the tools in their tool belts to do on their own that really make a huge result. I see it in the women that I coach, I see it in myself, and can really set you up for success for the rest of your life. And I like to say a lot too, like if women are listening to this and they are like, shoot, I'm past that marker, like there's no, like I missed my mark. That's not true at all, because I work with women who have had a C-section like 1, 2, 3 years ago who come to me and who are like, Katie, I'm so unhappy with my C-section shelf or pooch or all these things. And a lot of the times that's the way your fascia has like healed and is making that overhang. And so doing some of these things like the massage and cupping, really learning how to do diaphragmatic breathing for when you're like exercising, but also just like picking heavy things up at home, like that can all be worked on. So just because you didn't do like the groundwork and building in the first year doesn't mean it can't be worked on later. I'm just saying that those things like can really, really help speed up the process and make it a lot more helpful, but it's things no one's talking about, right?
It's not. And
yeah,
it's important to know that if you have this information and you can apply it early on, you'll have better success. And that if you are past a point of that early recovery stage, it's never too late. I think because there's a lot of stress that comes in. It's like, oh, I didn't know this. Well, listen, nobody knows this. Right. And that's the unfortunate part. Right. And so, for a mom of three, that's like not you, who's a motivated person, but for a mom of three who's like, how do I do this? How do I do these self-care things that you're saying, scar massage or diaphragmatic breathing or even just exercise? What's a tip that you give for some moms who are struggling time management or accountability?
Yeah, 100%. Well, so when I work, the reason I do online coaching is because I think moms need this help everywhere. And so now I work with women all over the world for it. But because I feel like some of the biggest barriers for moms to get into biggest barriers to just take care of yourself in general is time management, and you just are so focused on everyone else all the time that you're the first person that's going to go out the window, right? So when I started my business, I was seeing people only in person. It was like moms just cannot, like, the barrier of like leaving the kids, leaving the house, driving somewhere, working out for 45 minutes. It's just like, it's not going to happen. It's not realistic. So then I was like, okay, what are ways I can help women work out from home and have some accountability? So with the women I coach, give them a full week. With my one-on-one coaching, I'll do like a full week of workouts that you do on your own time, but I see when you do them. So it's like, and then I have a system where we kind of like chat throughout the week. So that works really well. But if you were just to do workouts on your own, I would say a couple things. One is to lose the thought process that in order for a workout to be effective, it has to be 45 minutes to an hour. Moms just don't have that type of time. And there's a lot of research out there that 4 to 5 short workouts a week is actually way more beneficial than 2 or 3 60-minute workouts. So like 4 or 5 10 to 20 minute workouts, you're going to get a lot more bang for your buck and see a lot more change in your body than 1 or 2 60-minute workouts a week. So knowing that the research is back there for that, you can kind of like have the mindset shift that even if I just get something small in, it's gonna be helpful.
Moms everywhere are like,
Always.
thank goodness.
Yeah, right. I always say too, like, this is a consistency game, not a like start out and do everything perfect game. And so I'd much rather you do 4 10-minute workouts a week if that's what you're going to be able to stick with, than be like, I'm going to do everything perfectly at once and do like, whatever, like more than I've ever done before. But I think women have this all or nothing mentality when it comes to
Well, it's the
workouts. It's like,
perfectionism.
yeah, it's a perfectionism thing. And it's like, I want this change right away. Like, what's the biggest way we can go in? And like, I'm always like, you're setting yourself up for failure in like 2.5 weeks, because you're just gonna, like, there's no way realistically that's gonna fit into your life. So
Well,
I
you're
think that's
excited,
really
right? It's like they're
important. Yeah,
excited at the beginning, and then the momentum's like, yeah. And
I
then real
know.
life sets in, and now the excuses start coming up.
I think that that's really important. And then I always say to moms too, use your exercise time for strength training over cardio. Strength training is always going to be the biggest bang for your buck. It's going to be what helps your body recomposition, helps your muscles grow. And then throughout the rest of the day, the more muscle mass you have, the higher your metabolism is, all these things. It's the most effective use of your time. So spend those like 4 20-minute sessions doing strength work, and then get your steps throughout the day with your kids the rest of the day the best that you can. That's really important. And then another tip I always have for moms is it is so easy, especially with the women I work with who are stay at home moms. But I really think, like, for any mom to be like, okay, I'm going to fit this in later in the day, like when the baby's napping, like when there's a second. Don't do that. That's like, it's way too easy for something to come up. Schedule your workouts like you would a dentist appointment, a doctor's appointment, a work call, anything like that. And actually put it in your calendar and block off the rest of your time, just like any other major thing, right? Because like, if this is really important to you, you should treat it just as important as any other meeting that you have. And like, the other thing is, like, if this is really important to you, it's just as important as like any other thing to the rest of your family, right? Prioritize it with your partner, all these things. Let them know that you're exercising and that that's the time, like, maybe you can have some help watching the baby, different things like that, because you are important and you just had major abdominal surgery. So like, this isn't just a vanity thing at this point. This is like how you're going to recover the best and how you're going to feel the best for the rest of your life, I think. So I think that those things can be really helpful. I also think like nutrition with moms, building muscle mass back up, like those internal wounds that you have to heal after a C-section, it can be incredibly, or even if you just have postpartum weight loss goals, these types of things, like nutrition is oftentimes just as hard or harder for moms, especially moms with other kids who are eating. Cause I just feel like it's just so daunting. I think starting small and being like, okay, how can I prioritize like 3 days of healthy breakfast or different things like that? That's where I always try. I base my coaching very much in what's the most realistic for women, so they'll stick with it. If I like, I feel like I could like say that again and again and again. Like, what are you actually going to be able to do? Because the more you pick these things up, the better you feel, and then you're more likely to build upon healthy habits. But I think I would say prioritizing protein and collagen, thinking about how you are best going to fuel your body is really, really important in those first 6 months. And also like get some help, do a meal service, like get some help. Like if people are just bringing over lasagnas, be like, okay, here are some things like that I really need right now, because the way what you put into your body those first couple months is really going to help your
Yeah,
recovery as well.
for sure.
So
Well, and the digestion part too, because I know after my first, I was constipated for like 3-4 months because I ended up getting put under general anesthesia because my uterus tore during surgery and lost a lot of blood. And so I was on iron, plus like my intestines were just so flaccid. And so the constipation pain was worse than 30 hours of labor for me.
100%.
And the constipation was just so intense. Like, doctors are not going to be giving you this information. So just understanding, that the types of foods you should be prioritizing to help your digestion turn back on is really important too, because that's your overall health. Because if you're in pain or you're constipated, it's not going to motivate you to do other things as well. So I love those tips that you shared. I think that they're realistic. A lot of what you say is what I say too, like schedule that doctor's appointment for yourself in there. Like, book it in like it's a doctor's appointment you'd have to pay for if you miss, right? Because we don't pay any fees that we miss. And just making sure that it's realistic and taking that mindset away of perfectionism and that things have to be a certain way, because you're not the same person that you were before you gave birth, and you're still adjusting to motherhood, even if it's your second or your third. And yes, it gets easier at the more kids you have because you know what to expect. But then there's the guilt is stronger because now you have more kids to feel guilty about.
I was gonna say, yeah, the C-section, having a C-section with Coco, with my baby this past year, and having two older kids was actually like some of the hardest couple weeks, because I feel like you come home and you're like at least, I say at least, sometimes when I had my first C-section and I came home, Bo was in the NICU for a couple weeks, right? So Bailey was a toddler. People could really help her. Like there were a lot of, hard parts with that emotionally, but physically, I wasn't carrying a newborn all the time. When I came home this last time, I had, I think at the time, a 5 and 3-year-old running around. We live in a townhouse. So like, they're like, don't take the stairs. It's impossible. And I had a full term baby. So she was way more heavy. And I was like, this is
And you
so
were
hard.
recovering
Like,
from a harder
and
cesarean
I was
because you had the
recovering from a
first. Yeah.
much harder cesarean. And I just remember being like, this is such a joke that people are telling moms that they have to come home and like don't do any like chores around the house, don't unload the dishwasher and be leaning over, don't drive. Like I was like, do you want to watch this place like crumble around me if I'm out of commission? Like I was like, this has got to be, they have got to do more these first couple of weeks. So I think like, you know what to expect when you have older kids, but you have a whole nother level of like things to do. And so whatever you can do to just get, and I think also like once you have like 2 and 3 kids, like people aren't as like, there's just less people. Like at the first baby, everyone's like, oh, we're
It
helping you.
doesn't
The
matter.
third,
It's like, oh,
everyone's
you had
like,
another baby
whatever.
again. It's
Yeah,
like you had
everyone's like,
another one.
same, oh yeah, whatever. So I think like
So true.
choosing to outsource help the
Yeah.
first couple weeks after each baby, especially if you have a C-section, like get that help. Do as much outsourcing as you can just to be able to let yourself physically recover.
And something that we teach in, with the work that I do is like learning those movements that you're going to need to perform around the house, because ideally in an ideal world, and my mom was actually able to come for the first C-section that I've ever had, which is my third, to actually come and stay with me for 2 weeks. She's never been able to. She's in the US and it was COVID the second time. And the first time she was still working, she had to go back to work. But like she actually was here and I actually rested fully for 2 weeks.
Nice.
But like most people don't have that. And so you do have to get back on your feet ASAP. And that's more reason to get the tools and the understanding on what you could be doing literally hours after giving birth. Because I know for my third as well, I recovered so quickly. I was almost pain-free by day 7. And this physio messaged me online and she's like, you shouldn't be telling people that. I'm like, but I should, because I didn't just magically happen. It didn't just magically happen. It happened because I knew what to do, because I focused on these steps. And I think that should be motivation for us, because the doctors aren't going to come save you. They're not going to tell you what to do. And so you're just doing nothing. And then now you have to go home and be a mom and take care of a home. It's a lot. And so much injury, scars opening or incisions opening, recovery time taking even longer because of all of that. So the motivation is to know what to do early on, even if you weren't expecting a cesarean.
Yeah. And I like to say too, I mean, look, that's a hard pill to swallow, but the majority of women I work with are women who went in for a vaginal delivery, weren't expecting it, went through like the beginning of labor, ended up having to have a C-section. That is the hardest recovery to recover from mentally and physically, because you wanted one thing, you really went for it. It didn't work out the way that you wanted. And then now you're recovering from both. And most people I work with had no idea that they were going to have a C-section. So I tell all of my prenatal clients and friends, like, for better or worse, this is not a scare tactic, but just prepare, like go in with the thought that like you very well may be having a C-section. And I'm not saying that to scare anyone, because I very much I've had 3 kids. I've wanted a vaginal delivery with all of them. I've ended up having 2 C-sections, and that's okay. You learn something from every single one. But because I went in the third time, like knowing what I knew, it was so much better to recover from. So I like made this C-section mini guide that I have now and things, like with the intent that moms can use it who are even like 2 and 3 years out for like working on their C-section shelf and all of these things. But I would love it if people who were pregnant and were just making their birth plan and wanted to have a vaginal delivery had it, just in case they have to have a C-section, just to have those tools on hand. Or if you're having a scheduled C-section, be like, okay, what should I do to prepare my house, my like checklist, like all these things before I have the baby, just in case. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because we don't have control, because you need to go in with the best possible mindset of birth going the way that you had hoped, or, vaginally delivering, because it is the best for you and the baby for most of the time, because there's not major surgery most of the time. Like I said, sometimes there's other complications, but just being aware, because 1 in 3 are having a cesarean in North America. Okay. So it is the second most popular surgery performed around the world daily. And so it's very downplayed and it's undereducated and informed as far as what happens during, but even the after. So yes, like don't prepare yourself that you have to go into cesarean, and take away the mindset of like trusting your body and your affirmations, and like keep that for sure. And also just have something in your back pocket just in case, maybe even as far as, like you said, preparing your home or having things set up with knowing that it is a possibility, because cord wraps around baby's neck, heart rate drops, baby's in distress. Like that's not the hospital forcing you to do anything. Like that's something that's out of your hands. They need to get the baby out. Maybe your health is plummeting. So there's so many reasons why cesareans happen. It is life-saving. There's so much blame that people want to put on all these different aspects of themselves or others. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you have the information to get back to yourself, get back to some kind of normal again as soon as possible. So prepare for the best and also have things in your back pocket. Like you said, I think that's like a really great mindset. Because I know when I was doing my first, because I'm also a doula, like I was like, I want my home water birth, and nope, C-section's not even going to happen. But I think it's because C-sections were just so negative, and I didn't know you could be normal again after, which you and I know you can be. Well, I mean, after childbirth in general, are you ever normal? No. But like, you could be close to that again after a cesarean if you have a certain plan to follow to get back to doing all the things you enjoy again. Sometimes I tell clients they could be even stronger after their cesarean
100%.
than
I was
before.
going to say too, like I work with women who've had vaginal deliveries and C-sections, and a lot of the time, like with the like help with ab separation or just like with a weakened core, which happens to everyone who's ever been pregnant. A lot of women I work with are like, my core is now stronger than before I had kids because I was never focused on like deep core work, or I only was doing like the type of like core training we all learned about in the 90s of like crunches and like all these different things. It's only like the most superficial layer of your core. So like, it's totally possible. It's just knowing what to do. And unfortunately, there's just not a lot of like the correct information out there for women. So it's totally understandable that women feel lost too.
Well, the ones listening don't. Let's just say that, because they have people like you and I to listen to and share this information. And I really can see here. Thank you so much for sharing your story with me today, because I can really see, how going through such a difficult experience so many times that you went through it has kind of transformed you into being the best coach for the women that need you because of what you've been through. And you've been able to create all of these little parts of your business to support them where you didn't have that. And I think that is the best type of coach and the best type of person out there to help moms, because we know what it feels like. We're not just kind of talking top down and just educating people on what the textbooks say. Like, we literally have been there with you and we get it. And so it's just like a whole different approach. So I love that. And thank you so much for sharing your story and your journey with pregnancy and postpartum. I want to know, where can listeners find you online and learn more about your programs?
Yeah, of course. No, I really appreciate that. And this was such an awesome chat too. So you can follow me on Instagram. My Instagram is Method by Katie Breard, and I'm on there a lot with tips and helpful resources. And I'm always trying to get back to everyone who reaches out to me on there. And then my website is Method by Katie Breard Coaching, and that's where you can find out more about my one-on-one coaching. You can fill out a lead form and I'll reach out to you. And then I have a C-section mini guide that I'm going to link to here, as well as, and I made a special discount for you guys, as well as an on-demand, like 4-week workout program. So there's a lot of different ways to be in touch with me, and probably those ones are the best place to start.
Yep. And we'll link them all in the show notes for you to access. Thank you all for joining us today and being on Beyond the Scar. And if you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing, leaving a review, or sharing it with another C-section mama who needs to hear this message today. Together, we are all building a community of strong, resilient moms who are thriving beyond their cesareans. Thank you all for listening, and have an amazing rest of your day.